Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most influential figures of the civil rights movement in the United States, fighting against racial segregation and social injustice through nonviolence and civil disobedience. He was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, into a religious family. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a pastor at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, was an organist. This strong religious foundation greatly influenced his worldview and convictions. Education and influences. King was a brilliant student and stood out academically from an early age. He earned a degree in sociology from Morehouse College, a historically black institution, and later attended Crozet Theological Seminary, where he deepened his religious studies. However, it was during his PhD in theology at Boston University that he began shaping his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, influenced by figures such as Mahatma Gandhi and Henry David Thoreau. He believed that love and nonviolence were the only ways to confront hatred and injustice. Start in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. gained national prominence in 1955 when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. The action began after Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger, a blatant manifestation of the segregation laws in place. King, only 26 years old at the time, took the leadership of the movement. The boycott lasted more than a year and ended with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that bus segregation was unconstitutional. This event marked the beginning of his rise as a leader of the civil rights movement. Philosophy of nonviolence. Inspired by the ideas of Gandhi and Christian faith, King believed that nonviolent resistance was the most effective way to achieve deep social change. His method of protest involved organizing peaceful demonstrations, boycotts, and public speeches that challenged the oppressive system without resorting to violence. He firmly believed that love and forgiveness could overcome hatred and that moral justice was on the side of the oppressed. I Have a Dream and National Movement. In 1963, King led a series of peaceful protests in Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most segregated cities in the U.S. These protests resulted in King's imprisonment, during which he wrote his famous letter from Birmingham jail, where he defended the urgency of the civil rights struggle and criticized those who called for patience and gradualism. That same year, King organized the historic March on Washington, an event that gathered more than 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial. It was there that he delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech, where he expressed his vision of a future in which people would not be judged by the color of their skin but by the content of their character. The speech deeply resonated and became one of the most memorable moments of the civil rights struggle. Awards and recognition. In 1964, Martin Luther King Jr. received the Nobel Peace Prize for his tireless fight for racial equality and human rights through nonviolence. He was the youngest recipient at the time, at the age of 35. The international recognition of his leadership significantly boosted the movement, but it also increased the level of danger he and his family faced. Legislative achievements and opposition. King's activism was instrumental in the passage of key legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and prohibited employment discrimination, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which guaranteed African Americans the right to vote. However, his actions also attracted opposition. He was constantly harassed by the FBI under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover, who viewed him as a national security threat. Final years and assassination. In the last years of his life, King broadened his focus to include the fight against poverty and the Vietnam War, arguing that social justice could not be achieved without a fair redistribution of wealth and power. He began organizing the Poor People's Campaign, a movement to address economic inequality in the U.S. However, this shift in focus caused divisions within the civil rights movement and distanced him from many former allies. On April 4, 1968, while in Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by James Earl Ray. His death shocked the world but also solidified his legacy as a martyr for equality and justice. Legacy. The legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. transcends racial and geographic boundaries. He is celebrated annually in the United States on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, in recognition of his fight for equality and civil rights. His commitment to justice, human dignity, and nonviolence continues to inspire social justice movements around the world.